Hey there. Sorry to be no, actually 4 minutes late. I am so sorry. Um, I was working right up until the last minute, making phone calls for Dr. Whimsy. That's part of my real life work, acting as her assistant and contacting clients. And I had someone who needed to chat for a few minutes, going through a little bit of a hard time. And Whimsy always tells me to spend time with these people and act as an extension of her. And it's always my heartfelt pleasure to do that because I really love being there for people. I love being there for my dear friend, Dr. Whimsy Anderson. Um, she's one of the best people I've ever known in my life, and I'm very loyal to the people I love. Um, and of course, I do her show on Tuesdays with her, Taco Tuesdays, where we talk about news events and happenings in the world and a lot going on right now. But anyway, this is another installment of Chuck's captivating chat on the channel of Chuck's Captivating Chronicles. I just thank you so much for being here with me. Hey, Ward. Yeah, their client's doing better now, but I just needed to, you know, we, she and I are big believers in giving the personal touch. And in this case, I was doing that, but it was already like 5 o'clock, and I said, "I am so sorry, but I have to go. I have to go. I have a show to do on YouTube," without making that sound too pretentious. But here I am, and I thank you for joining in, and I thank you for bearing with me for being just a smidgen late. Because yes, I it was like 5:01, and I was here on my laptop typing away, trying to get everything set up and on, making sure I have my light in position. I thought, I didn't get a chance to fix my hair or anything. I hope it's okay. But hey, we're just friends here, right? We can just be ourselves. And more and more, as I've said this before, I just like going on here and being free form, not having any preconceived notions of what the show's going to be, but just to go for the ride, to surf on the energy as you guys give it to me, and I get to tap into all of those Hollywood stories I've got tucked away in my brain and see where it goes. Hi, Joyce. Hi, my dear friend. Thank you for joining. Was it as long as you're not having to chase your runny nose? No, no, my nose isn't running anymore. Thankfully, that's over. And look who came to join us. Miss Blue Eyes herself, Miss Sasha the Siamese. She's saying, "No, put me down. I don't know if I want to be on the show. I've had my moment in the spotlight." But anyway, here she is. And sometimes I have to pick her up just to keep her from jumping on the keyboard and turning the show off abruptly. That happened once when I was doing my show, or I shouldn't say my show, the show that's Whimsy's show. I'm her sidekick. I had to keep my cat from leaping on the keyboard during a crucial moment. But anyway, I'm so glad you're here. I got to close some windows here. My laptop did an update the other night, and that was another thing that slowed me up. I was trying to log on to YouTube and get going, and it was saying, "You have been updated. You need to click this. You need to agree to this." I'm like, "I don't have time for this." I was trying to close all the windows so I could get on here. But let's see. I've got Ward and Choice here, and I'm sure some others will join in. And I'm always grateful um, that people watch the recording of this later in the week. I always see the numbers growing, and um, I just put this out to the universe and just trust it's going to reach wherever it's supposed to reach. My dear friend Pam of Pomona Remembers, she gave me a wonderful spiritual exercise where you take whatever it is you're concerned about. And she said, imagine having a balloon and just blowing up the balloon and just sending it out to the universe and letting the universe take care of it. And I kind of think of it like this, just sending it out to the internet, wherever it's going to land. And as Pam said, you may blow up so many balloons, it's going to be like a Pixar movie, but that's okay. Yeah. Yeah, or low those involuntary updates. I just find for me, they always happen at inopportune times, like right now. Any thoughts about Miss Roberta Flack leaving the world? Yes. Yes, she was an amazing singer. I was just thinking that today. I'm sure many of us were, because I always loved her, but I had not listened to Roberta Flack in years. But yet, I mean, those are some of the all-time classics, Killing Me Softly with this song, um, Feel Like Making Love. I'm trying to think of some of her others, but beautiful voice, presence, such a talent. I can remember her as a little boy watching her on the Grammys. There was a period where she was like the darling of the Grammy Awards, kind of like Stevie Wonder, where every year she'd win more Grammys. But yeah, she made a lovely contribution to the world. 88 years old. I understand that she had been suffering with ALS the last years of her life. And they said on the news that she was surrounded by her family, which, that's a lovely way to go, to be surrounded by your loved ones. Since I'm assuming she passed away peacefully. And the beautiful thing, yeah, Killing Me Softly with the song, that is so beautiful, so beautiful. Yeah, Lou Gehrig's disease, that is ALS, and oh dear, that's of course a horrific disease, a way to go. And I don't know the circumstances of the severity, but I do hope she passed peacefully and comfortably. And we are blessed with recordings. We're so blessed with recordings. It was someone, I think it was Hans Christian Andersen. I saw a quote that he spoke of how we're surrounded with so many miracles, but they're so common that we take them for granted and dismiss them. You think about what a miracle it is that we have people like Billie Holiday, Judy Garland, Frank Sinatra, uh, preserved for, in theory, forever. On originally audio tape, vinyl records, motion picture film. Now it's all digitized. It changes forms, but yeah, it's preserved. I was thinking this just last night. There's an art project I'm working on involving 19th century um, people of the arts. I won't say more about it right now, but there was an opera singer, I Adriana Patti. I may be saying her name wrong, but I found some beautiful photographs of her, and I wanted, sorry, my cat here, and I wanted to include her in the artwork. And I became more intrigued about her as a person, and I looked her up on Wikipedia, and I found, even though she was of the 19th century, there were some recordings she made. But I mean, like in the very late 1800s, early 1900s, like wax cylinders and that type of thing. I think they said the original recording she did, the cylinders all have been lost except for one, and the one that does exist is so fragile, people are afraid to try to play it. And I immediately thought, well, maybe they could make like a 3D replica of that or something, or some digital magic where they could play that recording. Because the ones that we do have of her were around 1906. And at that point, she was in her 60s, and it was acknowledged that her voice was not, as most opera singers, her voice was no longer in its prime. So you just got an idea what she was like. But I thought, even to have things like that preserved. So anyway, I don't want to get off track here too much, but yeah, thankfully we do have Roberta Flack's recordings forever, and people like that truly never die for that reason. Um, I talk about my beloved Lucille Ball all the time. I love Lucy. You watch those old black and white films, almost 75 years old, and the life just leaps off of those films, the energy. They're very much alive. She's very much alive still. Um, what was that? Hans Christian Andersen was smitten with Jenny Lind, the Swedish nightingale, a very famous opera singer. I'd like to look more into that. Now, I don't wanna get into tawdry gossip here about 19th century figures, but there were rumors that Hans Christian Andersen, and Charles Dickens might have had a little involvement with each other, but it's been rumored. But whatever happened, it was Charles Dickens who abruptly ended whatever it was. I'd love to look more into that because I thought, wow, that would make a movie. Um, what was that? Alas, her career ended just before Edison invented the phonograph. Now that is a shame. That is a shame. But yeah, I knew that about like Enrico Caruso. In fact, Enrico Caruso, I understand he was like the first major recording star. I mean, obviously, he had a operatic career long before that, but it was the home phonograph, you know, when it once it became accessible to the public and people started having it in their home, much like people would later have radios and televisions. He was one of the first real recording stars. So it's like everybody had Caruso records in their home at that time, and a lot of those still exist. Boy, I never know where this show is gonna go, what tangents it's going to take, but that's the great thing. I even surprised myself. Um, but let's see, I was trying to think of some things to talk about. It's Oscar week coming up, and I live well, it depends on traffic. If traffic cooperates, I'm about 10 minutes from downtown Hollywood. If traffic is not cooperating, it can be more like 20 or 25 minutes, but I live very close to downtown Hollywood and, of course, where the Dolby Theater is, where they have the Oscar ceremony. And I know that this week it's particularly chaotic in Hollywood because they have to start doing street closures. They close off, I can't remember if it's 2 blocks or it's 3 blocks of Hollywood Boulevard right adjacent to the Dolby Theater. It's an incredible amount of preparation to get ready. They have to, um, all throughout the week, there's jackhammering going on and chain link fences up and, things they have to do things like weld manhole cover shut, remove mailboxes. It's very elaborate because of all of the tremendous security that has to be put in place. In addition to just regular things like literally rolling out the red carpet and installing that on the sidewalk. And of course, the whole thing has to be covered in plastic and tarps have to be put up. Um, Most often than not, being Southern California, we don't have rain, but there have been a few years where it has rained and they've had to put up emergency canopies and things, and they have to get the whole interior ready because the Dolby Theater, that whole area normally is a shopping center, a very high end shopping center, but nonetheless a shopping center. So they have to clear all that out and they have to get the grand staircase ready for the theater. It's quite something. Um, I don't know if I'm gonna cover it this year, but if you go on my channel, Chuck's Captivating Chronicles, I have a lot of videos that I shot last year at this time on Hollywood Boulevard, just walking around showing all of the construction and all of the procedure that goes on. And it does not vary that much. It's pretty much the same thing every year. So I don't know if I'm going to go back down there. Hey, Andy, thanks for joining. Um, I don't know if I see any point in going down there again, or if I do, maybe I'll do it next year. Um, it was a lot of work for me. I The month of March last year, because of all of the videos I shot, I along with all the regular videos when I was doing like 3 a day, that's why I got burned out. 3 a day in addition to all these extras. I posted something like 144 videos that month, and I was just telling all my Oscar stories, anecdotes, times that I've stood across the street and watched the stars going in, watching them go into private events. There was one year, it was Your $1 Million Baby. and Hilary Swank came over and with her Oscar in her hand, and she was passing it around, and I got to hold it and pose with her and everything. Lots of little stories like that, and maybe that's what I'll talk about more next week. Because my God, it's hard to believe Oscars are next Sunday. Can't believe it's coming up so quickly. But anyway, I've got a lot of videos on there if you just want to see a real first person account of what it's like to be on Hollywood Boulevard in front of the Dolby Theater while all of the chaos and cacophony and construction is taking place. And let's see, what's this? Andy, Chuck, can I ask something? Sure. What is it? Did you ever know or meet the Stooges or Marx Brothers Keaton, any of those guys? No. Oh, no, no. I never met any of them. Well, for one thing, they were before my time. And certainly, I think the Stooges and the Marx Brothers were all dead by the time I moved out to Los Angeles. Buster Keaton, he died in the 1960s. I've met many great stars, but as far as the old guard, which of course I'm very passionate about, the only old guard great star I ever met was Claudette Colbert. You know, major, major star of the 1930s and 40s. She won the Best Actress Oscar for It Happened One Night in 1935. I did get to meet her. And well, she was not a major, major star. She was a movie star. She wasn't major, but I was close friends with Evelyn Keyes. And I've spoken of her many times. I loved Evelyn so much, and I miss her all the time. Um, and I always jokingly say, my friend, the movie star, because she was a big star in the 1940s. And she always had great, great stories for me. She's the one who, she was at Columbia Studios. So she had great personal stories about Harry Cohn, the president of Columbia, the man that most of Hollywood hated. She actually liked him. And she had reason to hate him. Oh, she had reason. But no, she spoke well of him. Um, And the person she really spoke well of was Rita Hayworth. She and Rita Hayworth were both at Columbia at the same time. Of course, Rita was like the star of Columbia at the time. She was very much on the A list, but Evelyn and Rita had a good friendship. And Evelyn said, in those days, the female stars had to report at like 6 in the morning at the studio because they had to get their hair done, their makeup, the nails, they had to have body makeup, fit it into their clothes, everything. It was a lot more work from the women than the men. And so she and Rita Hayworth every morning would be together under the hair dryer, getting their nails done, getting their hair done and everything, and just gossiping away. It was a lot of fun. Let's see, where's some other comments here. Yeah, no, it would have been cool. I would have loved to have met Groucho. I've read some personal accounts of people who did get to know Groucho when he was older. I mean, one person, and we're talking about just regular people, like myself, nobody famous or anything, but people who, he just kind of took under his wing, and he was more than despite his image, his character, his public image, in real life, he was apparently a very sweet, unassuming man, humble, and somebody wanted to come to his home, talk to him or something, he was fine with that. Someone else who was like that was Stan Laurel. I think Andy, you asked if I met Laurel and Hardy. Well, obviously not. Oliver Hardy died, I think, in 1957, 58, and Stan died in 65. But Stan Laurel was listed in the phone book, and he had no problem with fans calling him up and wanting to chat on the phone. And on some occasions, he'd even invite people over. He lived in an apartment complex right on the ocean in Santa Monica, and he would sometimes invite people over. And at this point in the 60s, Stan Laurel was like a comedic god. He had been given a special Academy Award and all. And so all the comedians of the day, like Dick Van Dyke, Jerry Lewis, people like that, they'd want to come to his home, and they just want to pick his brain. And it was like Stan Laurel would just hold court. And he and Dick Van Dyke became extremely close. And this was when, of course, when Dick Van Dyke was at the peak of his career, with the Dick Van Dyke Show. And Stan used to watch it. And the show would be on Wednesday nights at 9 o'clock. And promptly at 9:29 or 9:30, as the closing credits were going up on the show, Dick Van Dyke's phone would ring, and it would be Stan Laurel giving a critique of the episode. And there was even one show where Dick Van Dyke impersonated Oliver Hardy. Oh, no, Oliver Hardy, I meant Stan Laurel. Someone else was playing Oliver Hardy, and Stan Laurel personally coached him. And Dick Van Dyke, in later years, there was this book, coffee table book. I forget what it was called, but it was where celebrities had allowed their favorite gift, the favorite thing they ever received, to be photographed in the little story. Well, Dick Van Dyke, it was a picture of a hat. It was Stan Laurel's hat. Stan Laurel gave him his personal hat to wear on the show when he impersonated him. And of course, had a full critique for him afterwards. What were some other comments here? Yeah, I remember that. Yeah, Groucho died just before Elvis. Well, no, 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 excuse me. Died just after Elvis. They died the same week. And of course, Elvis's death was the big news that week. So Groucho's death got really underplayed. Any other time of the year, he would have gotten much more attention. Let's see. What was it, Andy? Didn't Harry Cohn handle one of the great comedy teams of the past? Let me see. I think was it. Well, let's see. The Three Stooges were at Columbia, and I'm trying to remember what studio Abbott and Costello were at, but I know the Stooges were there. They were very much a part of Columbia. Um, let's see. Let's see. Now, I don't know anything about their grandchildren, but I'm sure they have stories. I should look for them on Facebook. Speaking of that, the other day, I couldn't watch it when it was airing live because I had an event to go to. It was Saturday. I think it was called the Judy Garland Archives. I think I saw it on Instagram. Judy Garland's granddaughter, Lorna Luft's daughter, Vanessa, did an hour-long interview talking about her famous grandmother, and I very much want to watch that. Very much so. I've met Lorna. I met Lorna a number of years ago, and haven't met Liza. Came close to meeting Joey, her son Joey, of only about 3 or 4 months ago. I was at downtown Hollywood for the unveiling of Juanita Moore's star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. And of course, Juanita Moore was the African American actress who was in Imitation of Life with Lana Turner. And it was a beautiful ceremony. And Joey Luft was there, but I couldn't find him. I couldn't get access to him. I so wanted to go up to him just to shake his hand, say hello. It would have been very polite, but just same thing I said with Lorna when I met her. I was very, very polite, reserved, but I just said, "Your mother touched me very deeply." And I just wanted to tell you that, and I'd love to have said that to him. I've seen Liza in concert, but I've never actually met her. Um, let's see here. Where's some other comments here? Yes, that would have been cool to have visited Stan Laurel. In fact, I've got a friend who's working on a book. I think he's just about complete with it, about Stan Laurel's final years. And I haven't had a chance to talk with him because he has been so busy. And he and I were going to collaborate on a couple of projects utilizing my artwork. But I'll talk about that some other time when it actually happens. You know, I I I certainly trust you guys, but I have learned the hard way that when you have projects, creative projects, it's best not to talk about them on social media or talk about them to too many people because unfortunately ideas do get Borrowed? I've had that happen to me, so that's why I'm being a little discreet right now. It's not to say I don't trust anybody. Let's see here. What's this? Sorry, what was this about Joey Lawrence? Whoa, I don't know. I remember he was on that show Blossom. Yeah, Juanita Moore lived, I think, believed to 99. Um, in fact, I'll tell you something that's interesting about Judy Garland's gravesite, which is also about a 15-minute drive from where I live. And I know, and it's actually not far. We're talking like 2, 3 miles, but you have to understand in Los Angeles, you don't measure things by miles, you measure them by minutes because everything here is about traffic. Um, in theory, if there was no traffic on the road, you could probably go from one end of Los Angeles to the other in about 30 minutes. So 3 or 4 hours. Um, yeah, Stan Laurel was in the phone book, and you know who else was in the phone book? Mae West. Mae West was listed in the phone book. And I happen to know someone who did call her, and he said she was wonderful. She was absolutely wonderful. Sat down for a few minutes and chatted with him, and I wonder how many other times that happened. Um, Lucille Ball, no, she was not in the phone book. She she was smart enough not to do that, but, um, if you know anything about her house in Beverly Hills, now we're so used to people living behind fortresses and ultra high security and gates and all that. She had her mansion in Beverly Hills was right on the corner of Roxbury Drive, sidewalk going by, walkway straight to her door. And I think it was Lucy Arnaz who said there were literally was not a day they did not have at least 27 people knocking on the door wanting to see Lucy. Now, in that case, it was usually the housekeeper who answered the door and politely shooed them away. In fact, this is reminding me of another story because tourists can sometimes be really obnoxious. And Joyce, you probably know this from all your travels. Like any of us who have gone to Europe and you see the American tourists, and frankly, sometimes they're embarrassing. They're a little obnoxious. I can see why we have a reputation abroad. But anyway, these tourists, somewhere, I guess it was your typical Midwestern family from Peoria or whatever, they set up a picnic on Lucille Ball's front lawn, actually laid out a blanket, picnic basket, and chicken and sandwiches and stuff. They're sitting there just having a full picnic, lemonade and stuff. And Lucy looked out the window and turned her sprinklers on. And she admitted to that. I think she told it on a talk show. And I think she said she got the idea from her next door neighbor, Jimmy Stewart, who did that. Oh my gosh. Let's see. And what was it about Liza, the elder, Lorna, and Joey, the youngest? Yes. Well, Liza, of course, was, with her husband, Vincent Minnelli, and Lorna and Joey were with Sid Luft, her third husband. And in addition to meeting Lorna, almost meeting Joey, I've told the story before the time I met Sid Luft, Judy's third husband. And this was when I was working in Brentwood and I was in the health industry. And he came in wanting some vitamins, nutritional help. And I didn't recognize him until I saw his name on the credit card, Sid Luft. And I had read so many biographies of Judy Garland, since I was a kid. So it was like I already knew who he was. And of course, I knew that he had been vilified. There were a lot of bad things written about him and so forth. But there was also good. The marriage was very volatile, but it wasn't all bad. There were times when they were very much in love. And what I saw in Sid Luft confirmed that. Because again, as I said, how I approached Lorna, and I know celebrity etiquette very well. I know how to behave myself, and I know just to be direct to the point and be brief. No BS. And I just said, sir, Judy just touched my heart very much, and it's just a pleasure to meet you." And I didn't have any expectations beyond that, but he just lit up. If you had seen that man's eyes, saw what I saw, he was very much still in love with Judy. I saw it for myself. The way he lit up, the way he smiled, like it's like he wanted to talk. It's like this is a man who didn't get approached very much. He didn't get recognized. And the fact that someone young, I was a lot younger then, some kid would approach him and want to know about Judy, and he just started talking about her with me. I mean, he didn't reveal anything overly personal, anything like that, but he just spoke so lovingly of her, of how proud he was of her, how he admired her. And he was telling me at the time about her television series. You know, she had a variety show on CBS that only lasted one season, and it was believed for many years to be lost. You know, other than some really bad film clips, you know, kinescope film clips, that type of thing, like her appearance with Barbara Streisand, that still endured on film, but the shows themselves were believed to be lost. And, yeah, because this was in the I think this was in the late '90s, I think, roughly, like, n I'm gonna guess roughly 1997 or so, I could be wrong on that, but anyway, he was telling me, and he was excited, he said, "We found the videotapes. We found the master videotapes to her Judy's show, and we're gonna put it out on DVD. We are preserving it, we're restoring it," and he was so excited. And I said, "Where did you find them?" And he said, "You're not gonna believe this, and we don't know how they ended up there, but they were in somebody's basement in Tennessee." Yeah, like this holy grail of television, it was down in the basement in Tennessee, I guess. Thank goodness they found it because, you know, I know from growing up in Virginia, we had a basement. A lot of houses back east have basements, and I know how moldy and damp basements can get, and that's like the worst thing for videotapes. You know, that's the reason I talked about this a few weeks ago on the show about the salt mines in Utah and Kansas deep underground where they store videotapes and audio recordings and film negatives and things because it is the perfect dry climate controlled climate to keep those things safe. A damp basement is not. But anyway, the videotapes survived and in very good condition. I know that because I bought the DVD set, and I think a lot of the shows are now on YouTube, so they're a lot more accessible. But he was just like over the moon excited. And I knew that he cared so much about preserving Judy's legacy. And I remember that was the week I was going to see at the Hollywood Bowl. They were going to do a concert version of Guys and Dolls, and Lorna Luft was going to be in it. And I think it was Guys and Dolls. I could be wrong on that. This is, God, like 30 years ago. So I'm trying to remember. But anyway, he just said, "I am so proud of my daughter. I am so proud of her, and she has so much of her mother's talent." And so I got to see that side of Sid Luft, you know, the adoring husband of Judy, the father of Lorna, you know, it was really lovely. I better check my comments here. Yeah, Lorna was in Grease too. Hermione Gingold always listed herself in the phone book. Oh, I bet she was a character to talk to. Um, she said that having unlisted numbers meant no one ever called her. She loved to talk. Well, I am sorry I didn't know about that. I would have given Hermione a call and had I been older and known about it, I would have given Stan a call and Mae West a call. And there was somebody else who was listed in the phone book. I'm trying to think who it was. Um, but yeah, that's lovely. Yeah, I think that was the case, like with Stan Laurel. He was in very poor health the last decade or so of his life, or even more so. I think it was more like the last 15 years, but he could not work anymore. And he also went on record as saying, even if he could, he wouldn't, because he would never perform without Oliver Hardy. He would never perform without Oliver. And he did one thing. Stan Laurel did do. He kept on writing Laurel and Hardy scripts. It was just very hard to turn off that mindset, that genius. 'Cause if you don't know that about Stan Laurel, he was the mastermind behind the act. Yes, he played the dumb one, but he was the one who pretty much directed, wrote the scripts, did the character development for both of them. Oliver Hardy just came there and masterfully showed up and did his job. And as Stan would say, yeah, he'd come, often get everything perfect on the first take. He just would be letter perfect on the first take. They'd get everything they need, and then he'd go off to play golf somewhere or go to the racetracks. But Stan was fine with that, but Stan was the one who did all the hard work, the heavy lifting. No, Mae West, that is a fact. She was in the phone book. And I also have another friend who, when he was 17 with his brother, and I forget the circumstances, but got to visit her at her apartment in the Ravenswood. And I believe I've told this before, but I'll just mention it for context sake that, again, he said she was just wonderful, no pretense, down to earth, sweet as could be. But her one provision, she didn't they had this was in the days before digital cameras, it's just those little Kodak Instamatic things with film. They wanted to take a picture of her, and she refused. But she refused graciously. She said, "Please, boys, understand something." And this is quoting what he said. She said, "My face is my fortune, and I can't afford to have bad pictures of me. Get out. But you are free to go around my apartment. You can take all the pictures you want. Take pictures of anything you want." So she was gracious about that. Or Garbo. Oh my God, no. Greta Garbo most definitely would not have been in the phone book. No, 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 no. What was that? She went so far as to remove all the phone numbers from her receiver so no one could pick up said numbers. Well, actually, that was very shrewd. That was actually a smart thing to do. Um, Contrary to belief, Garbo was not a cold woman. People said she was warm, she was gracious, her friends adored her, and she did entertain from time to time, like intimate little dinner parties and that type of thing. Debbie Reynolds told a story once of when she was at Greta Garbo's apartment in New York. So I think that was actually smart of Garbo. She was just protecting herself. It She just was a very private woman, and she always was. She was not someone who enjoyed the perks of movie stardom. She was more about the work. She was a very dedicated film actress. She loved to work, but all that other stuff, movie premieres and what have you, she wanted nothing to do with that. Very private. She just wanted to be alone. Or she said, "I didn't want to be alone. I wanted to be left alone." And she pointed out there's a very big difference there. So I don't blame her. It's just like, I'm reminded of something I saw just last night on YouTube. I found an Ellen DeGeneres interview with Barbara Streisand at Barbara's quote unquote home. But what Ellen DeGeneres did, she picked 4 women out of her audience to come with her to Barbara's home to basically sit in chairs and be an audience, to clap and laugh. It was kind of like a novelty thing. But when Barbara found out about that, she made arrangements to do the interview in somebody else's home. And she later said, "I didn't want strangers coming into my home." And I thought, no, I don't blame Barbara. I thought, I don't know that I'd want strangers coming into my home either, casing things out, seeing what I have, or reporting private things. When you're in a celebrity's position like Barbara Streisand, you've got to be very careful of those things. So, like Garbo taking phone numbers off for receivers and things. I agree with that, actually. let's see here. Oh yeah, Miss Garland's last spouse. Yeah, I heard some bad things about him. His name was Mickey Deans, and it was when I visited Charles. This was again, God, I sound old here. This was like 30 years ago, more than 30 years ago. I went to a man's home. His name was Charles Williamson. And interestingly enough, while we're on the subject of Garbo, I met him because I bought a Greta Garbo autograph from him that he had obtained from a Christie's auction. And it came up in conversation where he lived. And he said, well, Judy Garland used to be my house guest. And I said, oh, really? Really? And I had a friend just worship Judy Garland. I said, could I please bring my friend to your home? Could we see where Judy stayed? And of course, I've told the story about how she stayed in the guest room for like 3 months. And Charles and his life partner, you know, Judy wanted to do something to thank them. She was very broke at the time. And I mean, broke. A lot of people don't believe this. How could a big movie star like Judy Garland be that broke? Well, she was. She was in tremendous trouble. I hear my cat about to throw up over here. Oh, well, I'll deal with it after the show. Sasha, they always like to throw up on good things. She's right on my rug. Anyway, where was I? Yeah. They said, she was in a lot of trouble with the IRS. They were garnishing all of her wages. She would do a concert and the money would just get sucked up a straw. It would just be taken away from her immediately because she owed millions of dollars to the IRS. And they said she was so broke, she didn't have a home anymore. And all she had when she came to stay with him was a shopping bag with 2 skirts and 2 blouses. They weren't kidding. A lot of people think I'm making this story up, but this is what they told me. And she stayed about 3 months, and what she was doing the last year of her life was sleeping on people's couches, staying in people's guest rooms, and I've told the story of how she had no money to reciprocate, but she wanted to do something to thank them. And my God, how she thanked them. She put the Carnegie Hall record, the 2 records on the stereo, and she went up to the top of their beautiful staircase, stood at the top of the staircase like she was on a stage, and she proceeded. Well, Charles and his partner sat on the couch down below. She sang along with the record, and they said she sang in full voice like she was performing for 50,000 people. She put full energy, full voice, did a full concert, the full Carnegie Hall concert from beginning to end just for the 2 of them so she could thank them. But anyway, to get to the point of Mickey Deans, they told me that's why she left abruptly, because it was to go off with Mickey Deans. And of course, later they went to England, and that's where she lived the last 6 months or so of her life. And that's where she, of course, died in their little home. And if you've ever seen the Renee Zellweger movie, they touch upon that a bit. That movie is heavily fictionalized, but that much is true. She was performing at the Talk of the Town nightclub, and she needed the money desperately. And I think there was something about her performing in England. It was a way, I could be wrong on this, but I think it was so the IRS could not touch her wages. That's why she performed there. And that's where she was with Mickey Deans. But I asked Charles about that. And I think in my naivety, I said, well, I'm glad she at least had someone who loved her then. And he rolled his eyes up in his head and he said, no. He said, Mickey was a user. And I'm quoting Charles Williamson. He said, Mickey Deans was nothing more than Judy's drug dealer. And more or less implied he had a hand in her death. I'm sorry, I'm being careful of my language here, but that's what I was told. Anyway, that's in response to someone asking about her last husband. Let's see here. What was this? Miss Love said, compared to Mr. Dean's, Cato Kalin was man of the year. Yeah, that is saying something. I don't think the children were fond of him at all. Well, I know the children, Liza, Lorna, and Joey had a big issue because they wanted their mother to be buried in in California, in Los Angeles, and he overruled them, and that's why she was interred in, New York for many, many years, and it was only in the last few years, I forget specifically what year it was, but has it been like 5, 6, 7 years now? But anyway, the children had Judy's remains flown out here, and, Hollywood Forever Cemetery built a beautiful mausoleum. It's called the Judy Garland Pavilion. They built it just for her. I mean, there are other spaces in there, and I'm sure they go for a fortune, people wanting to be interred next to Judy, but it's a beautiful, beautiful marble wall, Judy Garland, engraved, her dates, yellow roses on there. I forget what else it says. And there are spaces there for Liza, Lorna, and Joey for the future so they can all be interred together. But it's a really lovely final resting place, and they even have gates, little gates in front of the mausoleum where they look like the Emerald City from the Wizard of Oz, and all. It's a little bit of an homage there. And I have some photographs. I've shown the ruby slippers that I made myself. I've shown those where I took the 1938 pumps and hand attached, I don't know how many hundreds and hundreds of little red sequins and bugle beads and rhinestones, and I made the bows. I made perfect replicas, and I took them to her grave and held them up, took a picture, and then I put them down in front of the little gates in front of the grave. Yeah, I made some cute pictures. But and I posted them on social media. Most were positive. I did have one woman goes, "Well, I think that's really disrespectful what you did to Judy, and you should be ashamed of yourself." And I responded back, because I had a friend who knew Judy very well, and from him, I know her wonderful sense of humor, how gracious she was, how she loved her fans. So, in my heart of hearts, I did something I think Judy would have gotten a kick out of. She would have loved that a fan would have taken the time and trouble to make a pair of ruby slippers and go photograph them in front of her grave. And so I wrote something to that effect to that woman. But anyway, there were some other comments here. Oh no, I never met Johnny Carson. Oh, I've talked to some people who did, and they said he was not a nice man. Not nice. No, I mean, I can't say factually for myself, having never met him. That's just secondhand information I got. But yeah, that Ward, as you said, I hear he wasn't the most approachable person. Yeah, that's what I heard. He was just really cold and aloof. Though I have had, now I think of it, I think I've seen a few little accounts where someone said, well, he held the door open for them and he smiled and things. So I guess he wasn't always so bad, but I think like maybe like with Garbo, just very private. Yes, he loved his work, he loved what he did. Probably one of those people who even craved it, but once the camera was off, the lights were off, he was just ready to go home, go back to his life and be left alone. Let's see what. Oh, yeah, if you'd love to hear stories about, Andy, you were saying if you'd love to have heard stories from Judy from one person, that's Mickey Rooney. I suggest his autobiography. Well, he actually wrote 2 autobiographies. He wrote one in the '60s, and then he did an updated version. Oh my gosh, I don't know. You could probably look it up on Amazon. I think it was called Life is Too Short. A little pun there. But the '60s autobiography was more of a G-rated, sanitized version of his life. The version I think came out in the '90s, I think, please don't quote me on that, was a lot raunchier. Some tawdry little stories in there, but no, but for the most part, he spoke very lovingly of Judy. He more or less implied that Judy was in love with him, but he said that he was never attracted to her in that way. He said, I always saw Judy more like my sister, but I think Judy wanted it to be more than that. But he wasn't interested. I remember him saying that, but I remember Oh my god, some of the stories in there. When he was because when he was a teenager, he was the number 1 box office draw in the movies. I've always thought that interesting in the 1930s, in the era of Gable and Harlow and Crawford and Betty Davis, the 3 biggest stars, and if you go by the top 10 box office list, Marie Dressler, an elderly woman, was like the number 1 box office draw for 2, maybe 3 years. And then for the next 5 years, it was a little girl, Shirley Temple was the number 1 box office draw. And then in 1939, Mickey Rooney, a teenage boy, became the number 1 box office draw, bigger than any of these other stars. So when he was 16, 17, he was just huge, huge. But so he could get away with a lot of crap. And I don't know if you guys know of Norma Shearer. She was a very big movie star in the 30s. She's largely forgotten about now, but Norma Shearer was very big in the 30s. And she was in her 30s at the time. And according to Mickey Rooney, when he was 16 years old, they were having a hot and heavy affair. Like, the days when they'd had the trailers outside and the trailer would be rocking, the two of them would be in there. And LB Mayer, the head of MGM, was livid when he found out about this because these were two of his biggest stars. And that was the era where you could not afford scandal of any kind. Scandal was the kiss of death in those days. People, oh, sorry, um, hit my computer, the morals clauses in their contracts. And he actually summoned Mickey Rooney and Norma Shearer to his office. You stop that right now. And he turned to Mickey Rooney and said, "For God's sake, you're Andy Hardy. You're Andy Hardy. You are America. Behave like it." Oh, wow. Yeah. So, anyway, I suggest that book if you want his stories about Judy Garland. And also, believe it's on YouTube, the Judy Garland show. He was her very first guest star. Mickey Rooney, and it is such a charming episode. It's to me, it's poignant because you're seeing, we think of Mickey and Judy, the two bright-eyed, bushy-tailed teenagers putting on the show in the barn. And oh, you remember how they put on a show in the barn and Rogers and Hammerstein just happened to be driving across country and their car broke down or something. And they had no choice but to watch the kids do the show in the barn, and then they ended up on Broadway or something. It was always some premise like that. I'm exaggerating, of course, but it was very poignant to see Mickey and Judy. They were only in their early 40s, but I think from all the drinking, the drugs, the hard living, and this is not to impugn either the one of them because I love them both, but they frankly looked like they were well into their mid 50s. They looked much older than early 40s. So there was just something very poignant about seeing those two in their well into their middle age. And it was really apparent when uh, they were making fun. They were satirizing the old Mickey Judy movies, and she was playing Betsy Booth, and he was playing Andy Hardy. And to see them at middle age doing those characters, it really stood out. But at the same time, it was poignant, and I highly recommend that if you're fans of theirs. Um, well, what was that word? Somehow I don't think Miss Garland thought of Mr. Rooney as more than just a brother. Oh, I said that. I said that. Mickey Rooney said that he felt she definitely was in love with him. Only he put the brakes on it. He didn't want to go further. And you can read about it in his book. But when I think about it, when I visited Charles Williamson, because he told me a lot of stories about Judy, and she was there for 3 months, and he said that Mickey Rooney. This was when Mickey Rooney was broke himself. Both of them, former big MGM stars, and both had fallen on hard times at that point in their lives. And Mickey kept calling her all the time. He was saying, "Judy, we should open up Mickey and Judy talent schools, like dance studios, acting classes, that type of thing." And Judy just kept, because they were there listening conversation, and they said Judy was saying, "Mickey, I can't afford to do this. Please, I'm broke. I can't do it. I'm not interested." And he said that when she'd get off the phone, she'd be like, "I wish he would just leave me alone." So she was a little annoyed with him then, but I think it was maybe brother, sister kind of annoyance, that type of thing. I don't think it was anything serious. Yes, Sasha is photobombing. She's right here. Yes, and I say I also have to clean up the mess she made on my rug once I get this show done. Yeah, right, Sasha. Yeah, but I love her. I love her. Yeah. She's gonna be 10 years old next month. She acts like she's about 10 weeks. Anyway, come on, Sasha, be a good girl. Let's see, where's some other comments here? Joyce, I miss her so much. I gave her a special Judy Garland photo book. She loved it. Who was it you gave it to? Was it to Judy? Oh my, that's amazing, Joyce. Did you meet Judy? Judy Garland? Did I miss a comment here? If so, that is incredible. Um, I'd love to have met her. Let's see. Uh, into the what's this here? I'm looking at some other comments here. And I think what was it, War? Andy, I think I might chance dinner with the Stooges if I had no dessert and craved the pie. I was gonna say, you can't have dinner with the Three Stooges and not have custard pies to throw at each other. That's the dessert. And come on, to say you got hit in the face with a pie from the Three Stooges, I would I would take that with honor. Let's see. Speaking of broke, did you see the story when Groucho helped his brother when he was low on cash for the betting he did? I think I've read stories to that effect. I think it was yeah, Chico. Chico was always getting into trouble for gambling. He had a terrible gambling addiction, so I'm sure he did. And now I think Harpo was a lot more practical. Um, Harpo wrote an autobiography, oddly enough, called Harpo Speaks. And to my delight, it is available for download on iBooks for $4.99. Now, I just downloaded the first chapter of it. I haven't had time to do much reading lately, working on some other things, but the first chapter I read is quite charming. Quite charming. I hear it's a very good read. So I'm going to plug another book from another Marx Brothers brother. And Harpo, he probably had the cleanest image of the brothers, and he was very much a family man. Um, he and his wife adopted 4 children, and Harpo got the idea from his dear friends George Burns and Gracie Allen, who had adopted a couple of children. And Harpo said, "I want to have a house and in every window have a child waving to me as I'm coming home or I'm leaving." And his children just adored him. He was a very good father. But Harpo had a clean image, but even he had a bit of scandal, late posthumous scandal. And this was 1 year ago, 2 years ago. Christie's, the big auction house. It was either Christie's or it was Julian's. Had a couple of photographs, very rare photographs of Harpo Marx nude. They're actually on the internet. I'll just leave it at that. They're on the internet. Type in Harpo Marx nude. You'll see them. They apparently are real. They're not photoshopped or doctored. It's the real thing. And Harpo did these pictures as a joke for a friend. And nobody ever saw them. They were taken in the 1930s, and they finally appeared 2 years ago. And the pictures sold, I think, for over $4,000. Anyway, take that for whatever that's worth. That's not to impugn Harpo. He was a dear man. Let's see here. Yes, that was Chico. Sorry for the. Yeah. Harpo. Yeah, he was quite. His son gave an interview. Now, I don't know how recent it was, but he was asked about Harpo's voice. We mentioned Harpo loved to talk. despite his image. And someone's and the interviewer said, "Well, how can you describe his voice?" And he said, "My father had a very thick New York accent, like a Brooklyn, New York accent, and that's how he spoke." Um, yeah, it was fun to watch Harpo chase the women in the movies. Let's see. I understand that Harpo liked to be in the Altogether. Oh, wow. Okay, his original name was Adolf, but he legally changed it to Arthur in the mid-30s, and that's understandable because of, a certain other Adolf. In fact, I don't think many people name their sons that anymore. It's just like if I may just venture off just a tiny, tiny bit, the little toothbrush mustache actually had been very popular. Oliver Hardy, Charlie Chaplin, but now no man would dare have that mustache for the obvious reasons. Speaking of Bill Marks, is he still alive? I don't know. Bill Marks, are you I'm not sure. Was he one of the sons? I'm not sure. I don't recognize the name Bill Marks. I know that, Groucho had a son. Was it Arthur Marks was his name? Um, he wrote a book about his father in the 1950s, and he also was a television writer. I think the old Linda Lavin series, Alice, I think he wrote some episodes of that. Um, Harpo was quite bald off stage. Yeah, I've seen the pictures. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, that did give him the luxury, and I mean the luxury of anonymity when he was off stage. That and from stars like Greta Garbo, she would have loved that actually. Um what was this saying? He's the guy who wrote the book about Harpo, I believe. Oh, okay. I don't know. Yeah, I'm not familiar with that. I don't know. I'm not sure how many of the children of any of the Marx Brothers are still living. I imagine there's some grandchildren now. Um, but and I know on Facebook there's a very good Marx Brothers site. In fact, and it was rather controversial when they printed one of the improper pictures of Harpo. Only it was censored for obvious reasons. You couldn't put that on Facebook. Uh, but I mean, I was a little surprised. I saw that. I think the pictures were taken for Harpo's friend, the critic Alexander Woollcott, and I think Alexander Woollcott was, the play in the movie The Man Who Came to Dinner, I think was based on Alexander Woollcott. He was quite a character, and he was known to be a very acidic. They said he dipped his pen in venom when he would write reviews. He just would very little pleased him. He was always highly critical of performers and shows, but for some reason he just loved Harpo Marx. From the time I think it was when he first saw Harpo with his brothers on stage during the 20s when they were on Broadway before they came to Hollywood. He just wrote glowing things about him. Um, but let's see, what did I do? Oh, here's my notebook. My cat is on top of it. Well, I got off to, I was worried I wasn't going to have things to talk about here. Already on an hour, and I'm going to have to wind down soon. But I was going to mention, did anybody see the SAG Awards last night? It's the one thing I get to vote for, being a SAG member, so that's a little exciting for me. I actually have a ballot and get to send it in. And when they announce the winner, yeah, I was part of that. Yeah. But oh yeah, well, it's on Netflix. And they showed it live on Netflix, but the replay is on there anytime you want to see it. If you want to see it, it was a fairly good show. I was just going to mention it. It's the same thing I said recently about the Golden Globes. Because I um, worked in the health industry in West Hollywood, I would meet so many celebrities, and I have and we had a juice bar, and there also we had a lot of celebrities on a daily basis coming in just to get their breakfast or their lunch or to get a smoothie to go. I had people like Anne Hathaway coming in regularly, Justin Bieber, Jeff Goldblum. I can go on and on. But anyway, um, it was like what I said about the SAG Awards. I saw people, like Adrian Brody. I used to see him all the time. Really, really nice guy. Very unpretentious and humble. Colin Farrell, another sweetheart of a guy. Just nice as they come. Jeff Goldblum, I mentioned him. He was there. But Demi Moore, who won Best Actress, and it's looking like she just might get the Oscar next week. She's like sweeping the Best Actress category in all the awards. She used to be one of my customers. I always liked her a lot. And I guess the big surprise of the night was Adrian Brody not winning for Best Actor because he's been sweeping everything, and Timothy Chalamet won instead for the movie about Bob Dylan. So now, you know what I like about this? I've always hated the fact all these pre-award shows, like the SAG Awards, the Golden Globes, the Critics' Choice, all that. When you see the same people winning, they almost always go on to win the Oscar. And it used to be that was the fun of the Oscars. Not knowing who was going to win, having that suspense. And I've always felt like a lot of these pre-award shows have let the air out of the tires. It's not fun anymore. Well, I was actually glad, as much as I love Adrian Brody personally, I was happy to see Timothy win last night because now it's more open-ended. Now we don't know who's going to get the Best Actor Oscar. Now we're going to have a little suspense. Even to me, it's not a sure thing. We've seen this happen before. You may remember a few years back, Glenn Close. She was considered the shoo-in. It was like her 7th or 8th nomination, and everyone's saying, this is the year she's going to get it. And I was here on the couch with my friend Anastasia, and we were watching it, and they opened the envelope, and it was Olivia Colman, and we're like, what? What? So it is fun when there's surprises. So we'll see Sunday, and I'm sure that's what I'm going to be talking about next Monday, the Oscars. But it was interesting. I haven't seen the movie where the Bob Dylan film. I've somehow missed it. I have a screener, but I haven't seen it. But I did see Timothy Chalamet. I've never really been a fan of his, and not that I've had anything against him. I just haven't really kept up with his career. And he was hosting SNL a few weeks back, and he was damn good. He is really good with comedy. Sketch comedy really fits him quite well. And I thought if he has not done motion picture comedies, he darn well should find a vehicle for himself because he's got a lot of talent that hasn't been tapped into. Let's see here. What else I have in the notes here? I liked his speech. Now, some people would have thought it was a little audacious when he said, I want to be among the best. That's what I aspire to be among the best. But it was humble in the way he said it. It wasn't audacious. He really meant it. Like he meant it like I'm a work in progress. And this award is a step in that direction. So I thought, he was quite articulate. And I also loved seeing Jane Fonda. Jane Fonda got the Lifetime Achievement Award. She's 87, still looks just incredible, still has such a presence. And I was thinking about my personal encounter with Jane Fonda. And this was, let's see, she was 76 at the time. I remember that. So this was, if I'm correct that she's 87 now, this would have been 11 years ago. I was living in West Hollywood at the time. And like literally a block from me, less than a block, like half a block from me, 100 feet was a tiny little park about the size of a postage stamp. And I think it was National Women's Day. And they had a little miniature stage there, maybe about 100 people in that little park, and they had various speakers. Well, I found out on my phone that Jane Fonda was going to be one of the speakers. And I remember it was my day off, and like 10 in the morning. I wasn't dressed or anything. And I thought, oh, do I really want to get ready and go outside to see Jane? And then I thought, Jane Fonda's 100 feet outside my door. And how lazy can I be to not get dressed and go outside to go see Jane Fonda? And thank goodness I did. I got to meet her very briefly. Very impressed. At the age of 76, she just had the most beautiful posture and carriage, the way she had her shoulders back and she stood ramrod straight and had her, held her head up, and the way she moved with such poise. She reminded me of a dancer, the way she moved at 76. It was just incredible. But what really struck me, as I was watching Jane Fonda speak last night, she gave a beautiful speech. Little political, but I happen to agree with what she was saying. Um, but she was very much in her presence and in her power, and that's what I got to experience because that park was so little. I was lucky to get within about 7 feet of the stage. I was like 7 feet from her when she was standing on the little makeshift stage, and she was, I mean, not performing, but she was in like performance mode, which all the light switches were turned on and she was in her full power and her presence. And she was, oh my God, she was giving a fire and brimstone speech. And I thought back to when I described once when I was in the presence of original Van Gogh paintings in a museum, and I could literally feel waves of energy coming to me. Well, that's the way it was. Standing that close to Jane Fonda when she was in her power, whoa, the waves of energy hitting me. I had never experienced that kind of intensity from another person. I thought, oh, wow, to be on a movie set, acting with her, to be close to her, to be in her eyes, to be in that energy, but I at least got to have a taste of that. So that came back to me last night. And I was watching her on the show, and let's see. I should look at some comments here as I'm entering the stretch. Boy, almost said the home stench, home stretch. Was that a Freudian slip? Not directed at any of you, I promise. Let's see. Let's see here. I gotta go back, scroll back. Oh yeah, let's see, Ward, you were saying Harpo and Mr. Wilcox's bond was kind of like Bob Newhart and Don Rickles. Yeah, they were very, very close friends. I met Bob Newhart once. That was also in the health store, and it was no big deal. Just very low key and simple. And I don't want to, even in death, I don't want to violate his privacy and say what he was in there for, but he was nice. Let's see the story of Vernon Dent and Shemp Howard. I know of Vernon Dent. Sorry about that. But I wasn't sure that I didn't know of their friendship. Let's see here. Well, Dent and Shemp were best friends in later years. Dent went blind from diabetes, and after Shemp had died, Dent wanted to say goodbye to his friend. He was helped to the casket. Oh, that's something. He touched Shem's face and cried because he could never see his friend anymore. Oh, that's sad. Yeah, well, Andy, you're saying I would have loved to have been Mo Howard's friend. Yeah, I think we can look back at a lot of these comedians, and especially once we know what we know now. Like I said about people like Stan Laurel. Oh, I was going to say Joan Crawford was also very accessible like that. Mae West. If could have known this in their lifetimes. Wow. Like if you wrote Joan Crawford a letter, and she was legendary for always, always personally answering her own fan mail. And I have heard you'd write her a letter, you would get an immediate response like a day or two later. And then you'd write her again and she'd write you again. And there were people actually formed pen pal relationships with Joan Crawford. Um, let's see. Ward said, as Miss Carol Burnett said, comedy is tragedy with better timing. Not surprising about Mr. Chalamet. Well, no, I've said that before because when I was studying acting with Dee Wallace, played the mother in E.T. the Extraterrestrial. She always taught us that you play comedy exactly the same as you play drama. Exactly the same. She said you play it with the same truth. It's always hooked in truth. And you play it as honestly as you can. It's the difference, she said, is just comedy has higher stakes. Higher stakes, and also there's, oftentimes you have to incorporate rhythm and timing into it, but most would agree. She said this, in fact, it was Laurence Olivier who said, "Comedy is much harder to do than drama, much harder." But yeah, Dee always pointed out, play it with the same truth. In fact, she always pointed out Lucille Ball on I Love Lucy. She said, "You wanna watch the best at this, watch Lucy, because you watch her, and no matter how outrageous, look in her eyes, look at her body language, look at how she approached it like a serious actress. She believed everything she was doing." So anyway, that was right. And you're reminding me of a little argument I got in once on social media. Now it was a good-natured argument. It was nothing vicious, but it was the year Viola Davis won Best Actress, the Emmys, won Best Actress in a Drama Series, and someone said, well, she was the first African American actress to win a lead Emmy, for a television series, and I wrote and said, "No, that's not true. Isabel Sanford in 1980 won Best Actress in a Comedy Series, and she was the first African American actress to win for a leading actress Emmy in a regular series." And the person criticized me and said, "Oh, no, no, that doesn't count. That's comedy. That's not the same thing at all." And I just got into the whole argument and pointed out the things I just pointed out to you to hear. No, comedy is much more difficult. And I also pointed out to the person, Isabel Sanford won her Emmy for, it was actually more of a comedy drama episode. It was a more serious one. It was the one where Louise's childhood home was about to be demolished, and she goes back to visit it one last time. And she told this story about how there were glass doorknobs. And as a little girl, she would pretend the glass doorknobs were big diamonds. And it's a very poignant scene where it just as she's leaving, taking one last look around, she takes the doorknob off and puts it in her purse and leaves. But, yeah, yeah, comedy definitely is a much stronger skill to have, I think. Let's see here, what else is on here? Oh my god, Groucho Marx guest hosting Saturday Night Live. Wouldn't that have been something? I mentioned last week when I was doing a show about the 50th anniversary of SNL about Desi Arnaz hosting Saturday Night Live in the first season, and of course, Gilda Radner played Lucy. She played Lucy to the real Ricky Ricardo. Oh my god, it's just wonderful. Yeah, some actors did say that dying is easy, comedy is hard. Let's see, what else is on here? Okay. Oh yeah, Zara Cully. Oh, Mother Jefferson used the award, said, "I wish she had gotten a Best Supporting Emmy for that role." Yes, I agree. She was wonderful. Mary Louise. And, I saw an interview with Isabel Sanford on, YouTube, and where she was talking in great depth about the making of The Jeffersons. And she and Zara Cully were very close friends in real life. They had known each other for years. And I think Isabel was even telling the story of how, because they were both struggling actresses, how they were sometimes running into each other collecting their checks at the unemployment office. And Zara said to Isabel, "Honey, if you ever, ever know of a good role for me, you let me know. You let me know." And I think Isabel was instrumental in Zara getting that role. And of course, originally it was on All in the Family, long before the Jeffersons were spun off into a series. It was an episode of All in the Family. And It was Archie Bunker and George Jefferson, and, there's a lot of stuff they could say back in the '70s that you can't really get away with so well now, but I remember there was this hysterically funny moment because Zara really had that character down, and, Jefferson said something a little dismissive to her or something, and Archie goes, "Now, George," and forgive me for saying this is not politically correct, but this is what they said on All in the Family. Archie goes, "Now, George, is that any way to talk to your little mammy?" And Zara, as Mother Jefferson, "I am nobody's mammy." And she just lit into him. It was incredible. It was incredible. But she was so funny on the Jeffersons. Yes, she should have gotten an Emmy for that. And she died too soon. Oh, we there could have been many more seasons of her. I think she died after the 3rd or 4th year of the show. Let's see here. What were some other comments here? Yeah, Gilda was wonderful as Lucy. Um, Marla Gibbs. Yes, Marla Gibbs should have gotten an Emmy for the Jeffersons. She was nominated year after year and never won. She was so damn good. In fact, she was originally just a supporting player, a little supporting player. She was so darn good. The writers kept beefing up her role to the point where she was practically the 3rd co-star on that show. And there was also a wonderful interview with her on YouTube talking about the making of the Jeffersons. She had some great stories to tell. I think Marla was about 90 when she did this interview. And of course, her mind's still very, very sharp, and she's still working. Still working. She's an incredible lady. Um, but she talked about how um, what was interesting about the Jeffersons, it was one of the first shows to have a truly integrated cast. And also she talked about, well, she said, "Oh, Isabel Sanford was very much," using her words, "the queen." Isabel was the queen. Everybody deferred to Isabel. She was the star of the show. It was her show, and everybody knew it. And Marla also talked about working with Sherman Hemsley. And, it's always so interesting, people who play adversaries on shows and you hear that in real life they were close. She and Sherman adored each other in real life, had a very close friendship, but we know what they played on the show. But she was talking about how Sherman, he played that very blustery, full of himself George Jefferson. She said in real life, he was a very shy, insecure man. He was very soft-spoken, and often he was embarrassed to have to act the way he had to act, to say those lines. He was actually ashamed. And he would sometimes go to the writers, "Please, can't you tone my character down? Can't you make me a little warmer, a little more likable?" But of course, that's how the public loved him, when he was just being George Jefferson. And Marla was saying he was just so insecure, and he was always, like, scared. He would be so filled with stage fright, and he'd be so scared, and he was always so worried about forgetting his lines. And Marla said sometimes she'd be there nervous, wondering if he was gonna be okay, if he was gonna make it through the show, if he was gonna get his lines. And she made this interesting comment. She said sometimes his timing would be a little off because of his nerves. And she said she'd never understood this, but there was something about videotape. She said, "I don't understand it myself," but she said there's something about videotape that slows things down like a millisecond. It's just enough. She said, whatever it was, in person, the timing would be off, but when you'd watch the videotape, it was perfect. And she never understood that. But other than the videotape very much served Sherman Hemsley. But they had a close friendship, much like Agnes Moorehead and Dick York, and Dora and Darren, Bewitched, they were the best friends in the world. They used to go to baseball games together and hang out. And when he was too sick to work on the show anymore because of his back issues, Agnes Moorehead, for the remainder of the run of the show, gave half her paycheck to him to help support him. That's how close they were. So were some other comments here about Marla. I think someone mentioned LaWanda Page. Yes, LaWanda was fabulous. Again, YouTube is such a treasure trove, and there are things like the Dean Martin roasts that were done in the 70s. I had forgotten how many times LaWanda Page appeared on there, basically doing her Aunt Esther persona, which is so fabulous. Um, but I saw an interview that Joan Rivers did with her, and this was in the early 90s, and it's on YouTube if you wanna look it up, The Joan Rivers Show, LaWanda Page, and it was very interesting to see LaWanda as herself. Very again, like I've said this about comedians, comedic actors, I have found personally, as outrageous as they can be in person, very soft-spoken to the point of being shy, and that's the side I saw of LaWanda Page. Very, very sweet woman, very tender, and she spoke so lovingly of Red Fox. And again, she and Red Fox were best friends in real life, and we know that was quite contrary to Fred Sanford and Esther, the way they played it on the show, but they had a friendship going back like 30 years, when they were both working in nightclubs, um, performing, and it was Red Fox who got her the job on Sanford and Son. And and we know from those shows she was always letter perfect, but the story goes she had a lot of trouble. She had a lot of trouble remembering lines. She suffered from serious stage fright, very timid. Sometimes she would blow her takes and they'd have to do them over again. And the executives at NBC wanted to fire her, and Red Fox personally stepped in and says, "She goes, I go." He fought very hard for her job to keep her on the show. And Wanda was telling all this. She just said, "I owe everything to Red Fox. He always took care of me. He looked out for me. He protected my job, my work." And because she didn't really consider herself an actress. So I think that was part of her insecurity. And she said, Fred, to get her ready for the show, he would always piss her off before the show. He would do something to get her really, really mad. And and she knew it. She knew what he was doing, but he would get her mad. So when she would come out as Aunt Esther, she would give him hell. And it worked. It worked. And she had this cap, and I can't remember what the cap said. I am so embarrassed here. If I knew I was telling a story, I would have looked it up. It was something, it was like a word on the cap, like strength or courage or something. And Red left it to her in his will, as a reminder for her own personal strength. And she talked about it on the show, and she was very teary-eyed about it. And anyway, it's really sweet to see that side of her. Um, Well, what's this? Lots of celebrities have hard times remembering their lines. Oh my God, yeah, I know that for myself, from my own acting days. It's everybody makes mistakes. Everybody forgets lines. Everybody flubs. And it's one thing if you do a stage play and you rehearse it meticulously for several weeks. You have less some excuse there. But gotta remember, a television show is usually from table read to actual recording of the show is usually like 4 days, like the Carol Burnett show. When it was the full hour show, it was like putting on a mini Broadway musical every week. She talked about this. They had 4 days to put all that together. So, I mean, to remember all your lines and everything, and your blocking and everything, it's just a miracle people don't make more mistakes than they do. Oh yeah, Della Reese, she was another one that Red Fox helped out. I had read that about her. Um, Della Reese, a story that always stuck with me. It was the story of when she gave up drinking, when she realized she had a problem. Sorry about that. I tell people not to call me, and I'm doing the show, and guess what? Um, but, she said when she finally realized she had a serious problem and she had to give up drinking, was she this was early in her career, and she wanted a mink coat and a mink hat. That was back in the days, and that was like a very prized thing for a woman to have. That meant you had made it. So she saved up for like a year to get this beautiful mink hat, a mink coat, and the first night she wore it out to a nightclub and she got rip roaring drunk, got sick, went in the ladies' room, passed out on the floor, woke up, her mink coat, hat covered in vomit, just ruined. And that's when she knew. That's when she said, I never this she said that was like 30 years before. She said that the day she told that in the interview, she said, I've never drank again. That's when I realized I had a problem. I had to stop. So anyway, that's the story I remember about Della Reese. Um, but it's always fun to watch those bloopers. There's certainly plenty of those to be found. Um, yeah, just go on YouTube and look them up. It's always fun, especially from the golden era of Hollywood, to hear people like Betty Davis swearing on camera, messing uh, but yeah, they're there. Well, anyway, I've been on here for an hour and a half, and I need to go. But did anyone have like a final question or comment or anything before I sign out? Um, Otherwise, I'm going to say goodnight to you for now. I'll be here next Monday. I'm sure there'll be plenty to talk about with the Oscars. Uh, Last year, I had my dear friend Anastasia Pavlov here, and we were channeling our inner Joan Rivers and doing vicious red carpet commentary. And we did a live show. Well, she has to work that night, so we're not going to get to do it. So we will spare you that. But I'm sure there will be plenty to talk about. Oh, thank you, Joyce. Thank you so much. But anyway, please join me again next week, same time, same place. I'll do my best to be here on time, probably at 5 o'clock Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern. And of course, tomorrow I will be with the wonderful Dr. Whimsy Anderson on Taco Tuesdays, where we talk about politics and news events, and not much to talk about there now, is there? But yeah, and Whimsy, she's a gifted intuitive reader, and we do some readings. And anyway, that's where I shall be tomorrow. And my friend Pam and we're still in the planning stages on another show where we're going to just devote that more to talking about art and having other artists on talking about their craft. But that's still in the planning stages, even though we've done a couple of test shows on her channel, Pomona Remembers, and her other channel, Eli and Eden Creative. What's that? Taco Burger, please. Yeah, love to have some tacos right now. And wonderful people here tonight. I just thank you all, as always. I thank you for joining me. Uh, I'm very touched. I'm very touched that you come out for me each week, and it means everything. And I will do my best to be here for you on a regular basis. So I'm going to say goodnight for now.